Hi, everyone. I know we're a minute early, so let me just give everyone a few minutes. So thank you so much for taking the time to join our live remote work AMA series. Today, we'll be getting real about virtual events, and I'm really excited for this topic. Just to kick off the introductions, I'll go first. So my name is Johanna, the brand events manager at Miro, and I'll be your host for today's session. And I'm calling from LA, so it's top of the morning here. And good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone who's joining in. I've been at Miro for about a year and a half now. And prior to that, I was at a non-medical home care company for about 5 years, just running our internal corporate events and projects. Currently, I'm responsible for organizing our field events, meetup sponsorships, and our largest internal event called Distributed. Last year was our first time doing it, and we managed to pull it off in 6 weeks. So start to finish in a matter of 6 weeks. So I'm really impressed with what we were able to achieve in that time. So I have some great learnings I love to share with you all, as well as learn from our speakers here who have been in the events and marketing space for many, many years now. So with that said, I'd love to introduce our speakers, and just kind of going down the line here, we have Dana next.
Hey everybody, saying hello to you from Seattle. I hope you guys are all hanging in there and doing okay. I am right now an independent event strategist and designer. I'm working with companies like Twitch and Pantheon and a few emerging startups, as well as they figure out what their new virtual strategy is. Prior to that, I was with Tableau, which is now a part of Salesforce, and ran our user conference there and grew that from 1,200 to 12,000 attendees and regionalized it for global markets. And then most recently, I was at a company called InVision. You can think of InVision as an operating system for building digital products. What's interesting about InVision is that it was remote before the whole world went remote. So I was there for 3.5 years and certainly can answer some questions about how to best navigate in a remote environment and create connection with your colleagues. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Dana. Next, we have James.
Hey folks, I'm James from Mind the Product. So I'm based down in Brighton in the UK. We're on lockdown, much like the rest of the world, so perfect timing for something like this. We run a couple of different things, predominantly conferences for product managers. So we run those in 5 cities around the world, and then we run informal meetups in about another 200 cities for a community of around 200,000 product managers around the globe. We've experimented with live streaming more recently, and our first digital-only event will be the Asia Pac conference next week. So I can talk to you a little bit about what we've done there and how that's come together. In terms of the remote working side of things, I haven't been full-time in an office for the last 2 decades, so I've got a ton of stuff I'm happy to share with you there. Thanks for having me along.
Awesome. Thanks so much, James. Now we have Tessa here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tessa Barron. I'm the VP of Marketing at On24. So this is a very crazy time for me because I run physical events and I also run digital events. And now literally the thing I do every day has become the hottest topic, I think, in marketing. So it's, I feel like every day is such a meta. I'm having all these meta moments. Not only are we at On24 transitioning our physical events to purely digital, and we already run at least 1 to 2 digital events or webinars a week, actually probably 3 to 4. But now I'm also creating marketing about that very use case, and running a campaign about that very use case, and getting a lot of my friends in our industry, as well as all of you, asking questions about how we do it at On24, and also just all the different options and approaches that you can take to running a virtual event strategy. And I guess something that we were talking about just before you all joined was, a virtual event strategy, the best practices and approaches to it are the very same that you would take with a physical event strategy. It's just that the context and the way that you're delivering the content is different. And so I think that that's something that, coming from that, I live and breathe this every day, coming from that, from the vendor perspective, I think it's just something for everyone to keep in mind. Like, take a deep breath. If you can run an awesome physical event, you can absolutely run an awesome digital event. And it's just little things change about how you execute it. So look forward to your questions on that.
That's an awesome way to think about it. Thanks, Tess. So we also had Karen Hartline on the panel originally, but unfortunately she wasn't able to make it. But she's also a great resource and very helpful very knowledgeable within the event space. And hopefully we can have her at our next event. But with all that said, thanks everyone for the lovely introduction. So yeah, in true AMA format, let me just open the floor to you guys and see if anyone has questions. So again, if you do, just unmute yourself, give a quick introduction and ask away. If there are no takers right now,
maybe we can start with the obvious, Johanna. I think,
yeah.
So has anyone on any of the speakers had to cancel an event recently? I mean, I have. Have you guys, anyone? James, I think you had an experience.
We're due to be running a conference in Singapore Thursday, Friday of this week. That was going to be for 600 product managers in the Victoria Theatre. Full day of keynotes, preceding day of workshops, and we've been dismantling the whole thing over the last month and converting that to fully digital.
I know, so for me, the biggest thing was like, how do we communicate this without having people who were registered for the event feel like they were getting a letdown? For us, it was pretty simple. I had to cancel an event, I think 2 weeks ago. God, it feels like 2 months. And we basically, we did it the day before, and we had to send an email out to the 50 registrants that we had and say, it's now digital. And how did you guys work through that, James, to make people feel like they weren't getting less of an experience?
We started by going live with a cancellation notice of pulling the whole thing on the basis of we knew it was going to be something different. So rather than trying to persuade people to gradually cajole their expectations and morph them into something new, we went with a very, very clean break of said, the physical is not happening anymore. There will be a new digital thing. So we were trying very hard not to carry expectations over and thus give ourselves a clean slate to work with.
I think that's something actually I was saying to, so we have our own user conference that is up ahead in June, and we're figuring out what to do. And again, it's called Webinar World. So it's very weird because we're like, do we do webinars for Webinar World? This is what I'm talking about. And so, I think the first thing I said is we can't act like it's going to be the exact same thing. It's going to be a different experience, and that's okay. But the overall, the overall goal, which is to help our users become super users, can still remain the same. Just how we do that may change because it's now digital. And I think that's okay. People get it.
Yeah, I would just, I guess, add to that, don't think that you can translate, just punctuating what you're saying, Tessa, that you can just take your content strategy from your virtual program, or excuse me, your in real life program, and then place it into your virtual one. If you're a complex conference that has multiple tracks, hundreds of sessions, multiple keynotes, I think you need to think and have some empathy for your attendee right now. And as the weeks progress, there's a lot of screen fatigue right now. A lot of us operating in a Zoom world. And when you think about when people came to your IRL events, you were giving them a form of escape. You were teleporting them somewhere else so that they could be inspired. They had the brain space to have creative thought and want to connect with other people in the community. So I think there's a lot of intentional design that needs to go into what your virtual program looks like. On the subject of empathy too, not everybody is a working parent. I am. I've got a 10 or an 11 and 8-year-old downstairs, and I work really asynchronously now. So really think about what part of your program needs to be live and why, which is really the engagement part. But on your content side, think about doing the Sign You Live program. So kind of like the Tonight Show, where that is pre-recorded content. You get a lot of control with your production, and then you broadcast it as if it were live. But then it's also recorded, and you have a digital content library where people can consume this content when it works for them and when they're not trying to homeschool or keep their toddler alive at the same time.
Yeah. Dana, that is, I feel like I'm like you're reading inside my mind right now, because I think that's the playbook that actually we at On24 have always taken and try to help our customers understand. It doesn't have to be live. Zendesk did something really great yesterday where they had their CEO keynote. They had that as a webinar that was live, and then it linked to a portal where they had all these other on-demand sessions. And so it was like, listen, like, this is the exciting part. You know, they had a U.S. Soccer team player as well. Forget her name. It's just like, it's not Megan Rapinoe. It's another one. But the point was, they had that really exciting portion that people did want to tune in. They asked, you know, it was 2 hours, and like that's a good chunk of time. And then created all this entire other portal and world for someone to consume that educational session on a daily basis. And I think that's such an important point, Dana, about just because you could do all that content in a day or two, like we had to, right? Because you can't rent an event space forever. Don't let that confine how you think about the time frame of your own event. You could drip it out over a month. You could drip it out over a week, and you might end up actually reaching a wider audience and seeing people more engaged because they're getting things in a more confined and segmented basis.
I think about it like, oh, sorry, James, go ahead, please.
So I'm going to jump in on that one, because that's pretty much exactly what we did for the event that we're running next week. It was supposed to be a single track keynotes wall to wall 1-day event. So basically 8 hours worth of top class auditorium content on a Friday. And we figured there's absolutely no way that people are going to sit and stare at a laptop screen at home for 8 hours straight. So instead, we've turned it into a week-long festival of product in APAC, and we're focused specifically on the lunch hour, on the basis that we know people are going to be working from home. We know they've got things to balance, but everybody's going to sit down and take lunch at some point. So what we've tried to do is to say we'll have a different keynote speaker every day at noon. There's your anchor point. There's your bit of content that we want to focus you on. And then we've got other things happening throughout the week around that as well, with the idea that people can dip in and out of the bits that interest them most.
Yeah, I think that you need to think about it also like you are a television broadcast, and think like an executive producer on a television series, and what is the story you're trying to tell to your audience, and that can become episodic. I love, James, that you're doing it in a week. You could also think about like theming out every Wednesday that you've got a show that's going on and you have different guests, and you do the TLDR of what that session was going to be, and then you drive them back, especially if demand generation is a goal of yours, you drive them back to a landing page that is gated to get the long format content. And you can get really creative with what that programming looks like. It doesn't need to just be a sage on stage talking to a slide. Because the other thing I would urge all of you to do right now is, you have the advantage if you're in a position that you are just planning your virtual strategies right now. There are a lot of people putting them out. So what I've been doing is signing up for every single virtual event I can, and I've spread it across some colleagues that I consult with, to learn about like, what was that registration experience? That's your first touch point. How are you engaging them? Are you even thinking about engaging them after registration? Don't let them wait for your event. Drive them to your community page, drive them to another webinar you have going on. And then you get to see what platforms are using. What do you like about that? What don't you like about that? How are they incorporating networking? It doesn't matter if it's in your sector or not. I would encourage you to look outside your sector. But also on that note, I think you should be really mindful of how many of these are going on right now and how many are during the day. So if I showed you my calendar, they're overlapped, stacked on top of each other. So I would get clear on your sector. And if you're in sales and marketing, for example, there are so many right now, and they're either overlapping or they're back to back. So again, I go back to that fatigue. And then think about, just because your live event was on May 6th, does your digital event need to be on May 6th? What's driving your date? And buy yourself some production time. As a rule of thumb, I think, and again, depends what is driving your go live date. And Tessa, you probably have a lot more to speak to on this. I think for a really great, well-produced program that's thought out and the narrative has been thought through, and that you're really working with your content strategist and your community teams and your user group teams, et cetera, I think an 8-week window will get you something pretty great. But if you are driving to a product announcement and you only have 2 weeks, there are other options for that. But I guess I just would challenge you to think about why you think you need to go live when your in-person date was.
Yeah, I also think something too is that like most of the, or at least for us, for our user conference, the thing that's magical about it is all of the content is done by our customers. Well, for us specifically, our customers are the ones now running their own company's digital events. So for us to ask them to come and create a session right ahead of time would be not so empathetic. And I think that's something else to consider, right? Like if a lot of you are running conferences with your customers, understand that they're going to have to, their timeline for producing content has also been shortened. So it may be worth pushing out that date because they were originally expecting to come to your conference and deliver the content. And now you might be asking them to do that much more in advance, just so it's ready for your go live date to then run their session. Sorry if that made sense, right? Like I think it's not just your audience you have to be empathetic to, it's also the people that you're asking to present at your conference are in that same boat of digital fatigue, and we're all, every business has been disrupted by this. So rather than risk watering down that content, maybe it's worth pushing out that date. And I think, so Dana, that 8-week window that you mentioned, I mean, to do it right, I don't disagree with that at all. I think that the biggest thing for a digital event is that for it to have that production value, pre-recording really is the best option, because then you can do things like bumper videos, in before a session and really still have that kind of MC type feel. And that means it all has to happen ahead of time. And so while digital events are maybe easier to execute the day of, it's sort of the reverse of a physical event. Like everything happens the day of, but a digital event, everything happens in advance. So it means it means everything just your content production time has just dramatically extended, I think, the normal timeline. Like you can't just slap it together, I guess.
Yeah, but and if that seems daunting too, I think back to our point around thinking about something as if it were episodic, that buys you some time because you can rip it out.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so instead of asking everyone all of your, like if you're customer-led sessions, instead of maybe asking them to get all these pre-recordings in advance to go live on a single day, instead you develop an 8-week schedule where you have them broadcast their session live once a week or something.
Yeah, I do really like spacing that out. For our last year's virtual conference distributed, we had 3 days of back-to-back content. And so we noticed on the last day that the retention was a little lower. And that's just learnings for us, and just for us to apply that learning for our upcoming event in October. And then for Mind the Product, what I really appreciate with these digital events, so I haven't canceled events on our end. So I'm in the perspective of a sponsor. So we were sponsoring Mind the Product events and other, like Alassian Summit for one example. But I do appreciate with these digital events that we can also get included. And now we're sponsoring the APAC event that's happening next week. So I really do appreciate how there's more flexibility there. And then just kind of shifting gears with a virtual event, considering how maybe you want to space out the content and the time, just to avoid that digital fatigue. How do you keep your audience and your speakers engaged? And how do you achieve that piece of networking?
I think for us, that's a slightly different kettle of fish, because fundamentally we started as a community and that's still at the core of what we do. So while the conferences happen 4 or 5 times a year in a big bang kind of thing, they're built on the background of this product tank series of meetups that we have happening pretty much every month in 200 cities around the world. So there's these constant, up until recently, constant in real life meetups happening anyway, a real strong community spirit behind that. Some of those have moved over to streaming to keep some continuity going. But on top of that, we've also had a Slack community that we've been building for the last couple of years. So there's something like 35,000 members in there now as well. So again, you've got this ongoing communication, people jumping in with questions, chit-chatting away about the different things that are happening in their industry, how they're making the shift to remote, all of that sort of thing. So we have an incredibly strong community fabric that sits behind an awful lot of what we do, which I think probably makes us an unusual case in this particular conversation. I can see somebody here saying, just questioning whether that's the free or paid version of Slack that we're using for that community. That is the free version, which means we're limited to the last 10,000 messages. So on a community of about 35,000 people, that means we have a week's worth of archives, something like that. Anything longer than a week, it's pretty much gone. We're looking at what we can do to improve that in the future. But flipping to the paid version of that would have been about £500,000 a year just in a Slack bill, which was a little bit too rich for our blood at this point.
I think as part of your programs, think about in real life situation that a lot of, and I've mentioned this before in a different conversation, that a lot of the magic at the event is the in-between moments when you're at the break, you're standing in a queue to get coffee or a drink, or you're on the bus ride to the party. One thing that you can think about in the design of your program is like create those breaks in the session, and there are technology solutions like Icebreaker, where you could randomly pair people and then you can seed what the conversation topics are. Now, the one thing I didn't like about Icebreaker is that you cannot be intentional about the pairing so that the people who are paired are solving the same problems. And ironically enough, when I did this, I was paired with somebody I used to work with at Tableau. So I already knew her. But there are other technologies like E180 brain dates that you can use as part of the breaks, which I love about E180 is you can create, and it's expensive though, but if you've got the budget, it's really well worth it, because I think a lot of what happens at the event is peer-to-peer networking and learning. And on E180, you create a profile and then they match you based on those profiles and interests. The other plug I'll make right now is if you are not familiar with Hot Docimozo, and it's as hard to spell as it is to say, so I will send it out later. It's run by Liz Lathan, who used to do Dell World, and she was at IBM for quite some time. It is an amazing format that I think every digital event needs to do, because it really plays into peer-to-peer networking. Really quickly, what happens is you would go into a Miro board, for instance. You would take a orange sticky note and you would write 3 problems I'm looking to solve right now on whatever given topic you want to present to the group. The curation of who is in your room is as important as the curation of your content, I believe, too. So just remember that point. Then on the pink notebook, or Post-it, you might write, these are the 3 problems I've solved, right? And this whole exercise maybe takes 15 minutes for who. I would keep your group size to about 30 in a breakout room. And then meanwhile, as that's happening, there's a presentation of some kind related to that topic. Call it a half hour. In the background, Liz and her team are matching orange sticky note with pink sticky note. When those are all matched, those are broken up into like round tables, and then you name a facilitator. Orange sticky note what they have learned. It is the most engaging, most valuable session I've ever attended in real life and digitally.
Yeah, the use of these sticky notes is super easy, and a quick way to just have those scheduled breaks throughout the sessions. And I love using this in between sessions when you want to talk about just like your key learnings and takeaways. And so I really love that example. Awesome. And Tess, do you have any suggestions or ideas of how to continuously nurture the networking and interaction throughout the events?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of the Slack channel approach because I think the reason for that is now you've created a community that can last beyond just the day of your event. So if you really are trying to foster and leverage your audience to then build to continue that conversation outside of it, Slack will allow you to do that. Right now, you have you have an environment that will keep going and isn't just lost when once you've stopped promoting the event. So I think that's just a great approach, so that again, it's more modular. It doesn't have to be tied to that day, and it can continue. And that's really what I've seen. I think there's a lot of, I don't know, I think sometimes we also have to just recognize that sometimes those magic moments can't all be replicated. And if you try too hard to do that, then it may backfire. So I guess, I haven't, those tools, Dana, you mentioned, I haven't personally tried them, but I definitely will be looking into that. I just think it can be hard if you force it, forcing it may be worse.
It has to be choreographed for sure. There needs to be some intentionality. But if you're going to do a virtual event and call it an event, and you don't provide a forum or an avenue for these people to connect in some kind of meaningful way, because the other value to the attendee is getting access to people I normally wouldn't get access to, right? And there are solutions out there that allow you to do that. On the note about Slack, I think one cool thing, and I don't know, James, if you with the free version, but to implement a tool like Donut, where it randomly pairs you with somebody in the Slack community so that you can get more one-on-one engagement. Like, I'm part of so many Slack communities, some of them more active than others. I know some of you on this call are on the Field Marketing for the Win one, and it's typically the same people talking over and over and over again, and there's 700 people in that Slack. So yeah, it's like, I mean, it's only as good as the people want to engage in there, and there's an introvert is an introvert, whether it's in real life or virtually, and so how do you create some social lubricant for them to connect?
Yeah, that's such a good point. Like if there was an opportunity maybe to submit questions, right? And then you almost design channels that were specific to the topic, that would probably be a lot more conducive to having different people involved in the conversation, because you're setting the parameters, you're setting the topic, and you're really creating that. I think physically there's a smile that helps to provide that social lubricant or alcohol, whatever it may be. So in the digital world, you kind of have to create that maybe by setting a topic and orchestrating the conversation.
Yeah. And that's where our Slack community very much plays to our advantage, because we have that history already built.
Oh, that's cool.
35,000 people in that community, that's then separated into a bunch of different channels. So we have the area channels, like you can join the London channel and the New York channel and meet people and go for coffee and drinks and all that kind of stuff. But there's also a series of channels that are then split by special interest. So something on analytics and conversions, something on lean UX, something on data-driven design, all of those kind of things. So we can broadcast those channels during the digital event and say, if you want to get into this particular topic, go hang out in this Slack channel and you'll meet other like-minded people. So you'll firstly get the connection with other people attending the digital event that are interested in that topic, but you also connect with the wider global community that we have on that topic too. So it takes the networking far beyond what you'd normally get just at a specific conference.
And yeah, we were huge users of Slack internally at Miro, and we've used Slack for our distributed event. And we're now shifting to an online community platform called Insighted. And so our community is growing, and we really want to have different forums that live online. I know at Slack, it was a free account as well, and you lose the old messages, but no one's really kind of like going through the messages. So we thought the online platform Insighted is a great way to just have a place where all the communications and the conversations can live. And so that's a great resource for us to keep the conversations going after an event. Okay, and then I saw a question that came up, which it'll be so great to get your thoughts here. So this question is from Kelly. So it seems like their virtual event is at the end of June, and they're going back and forth to see, what the world is going to be looking like at that time. And she's afraid that people are going to be anxious to be in person, and the virtual event won't be as impactful. So it seems like the question is more of like, when you're not sure of what the space would be in a few months, how would you tackle it? Would you recommend having an in-person event around the summertime, or would you go full on virtual?
What I'm recommending for clients right now is, I think the hardest thing, well, besides the obvious about COVID-19, is that it's a game of chicken. We cannot, there's no end date for sure in sight to plan around. And so you have to operate with what do you know right now, and you know that that date is a moving target. So I feel like June is a little early to be going out with an in-person event. However, I am recommending clients to go full on virtual, but then if the climate starts to change, you can augment your virtual event with in real life gatherings. So call it watch parties at offices if people are starting to go back into their office. You can do dinners. You can do smaller incremental events that punctuate what you're doing digitally, but that way that is easier to spin up than trying to keep moving forward with your in real life event and then having only weeks to then decide, well, shit, we actually can't meet still in June.
Yeah, I love that idea. It's just to gather in intimate groups for now. But yeah, given the circumstances, it's really hard to tell in the next few months. Does
We're
anyone
kind
else
of
have
boxed in.
thoughts?
Yeah, we're kind of boxed in the other way because we have events that are physical events planned for Singapore next week, which we've obviously taken that fully virtual. We've then got a Hamburg conference in June for around 600, and then over to San Francisco in July for around 1700. So at the moment, both of those are set to be in real life events. Obviously, we hope the world situation clears up by then and we're able to run those things without issue. But the first step for us on those is to say, firstly, where is the cutoff date in terms of making a call on whether we can press ahead with those or not? Obviously, we put money down on venue deposits and certain things, but there's now the next set of dates when the next payments are due. So at that point, we can use that as a cutoff date and say, how much certainty do we have? How much of a bet are we prepared to place on this? As I think Johanna said earlier, it's kind of a game of chicken at this point. The other thing we're doing is obviously monitoring the APAC event very, very closely next week, see what works on that, see what doesn't. We've thrown that together incredibly quickly. We're pretty pleased with the way that it's come out, but it is very much, there's a lot of stuff being tested at the same time. Hopefully what we can do from that is walk away with the lessons of, for our speakers, for our audience, this is what works and this is what doesn't. And we can then start to build those contingency plans for Hamburg and San Francisco based on those. My gut feel is that, I mean, we're kind of 50-50 on whether Hamburg and San Francisco will run in real life or not. But where I'd like to get to is to be able to say, we can run a digital event alongside. And if we have to run those in some sort of reduced capacity, or we have a reduced audience based on people not willing to travel, so long as we can run some kind of event, we can run the digital event alongside it, give people the opportunity. And potentially we end up with a smaller physical event, but a much larger digital event running alongside them too. The San Francisco event in July, we usually have about 1,500 people in the room. We usually have a couple of thousand that are following along on Twitter and picking up whatever live streams they can. So introducing an enhanced digital format with those would make great sense for us if we can pull that together. But we're making no bets or forecasts until we see how we do with Singapore next week.
Mm-hmm.
James, good luck with Singapore. Would you mind sharing with us the link to that event?
Sure, I'll drop it in the chat session in just a minute. My laptop's being all kinds of weird right now, so I'm doing this on my mobile and I'm trying to get the laptop up and running so I can jump in on that stuff too.
Thank you.
I could also look for the event. And as I mentioned, we're sponsoring last minute, so we're really excited to join the sessions, and be part of it. So that's incredible. Awesome. Alrighty. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but I wanted to open the floor and see if anyone else has questions. Just where you can unmute yourself and do a quick intro. Okay, I see a question from Amanda Peacock. She asked, from a messaging perspective, the virtual fatigue is so real. We're trying to reduce putting virtual event in our subject lines. Are you guys seeing the same thing?
Tessa, you might actually see more because of all the all the people on your platform.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We've been doing analysis, and so Dana, to your point earlier about how this is an incredible time to see all different kinds of formats from virtual events. We're doing the same thing. We're producing blogs on it, and we did one on the communications around virtual events. It was mainly for the cancellation, but we'll be following that up with promotions. And what has been interesting is, from at least what I've like Zendesk, Domo, they are still promoting it as they would a normal event and really taking a content first approach, not really putting virtual events in the subject line, but then in their branding and as they explain, like it's all the same content, different experience. And I think that is probably going to prove well to help people, just remind them that like this is content, the same content that you'd get, or maybe it's different content. It's just being delivered in a different way, and not put yourself in a box so that people are turned off to what you're providing. So I think that it's really a focus on like, here's what you can expect to get out of it, and then you can say, and here's how to access it, rather than leading with that virtual event subject line. So I wish I had some data on that. I think I will say for us, we promote a lot of webinars on which is, webinars are a single session of a larger virtual event. And we actually, in most of our successful emails, we don't put anything about the webinar in the subject line. So our top performing emails are typically or remain the same approach that you take for any other content. We don't put webinars in brackets. We don't use that in any way. We go straight up with an example subject line is like, what do you do now? And so yes, while we're offering a webinar to answer that question, we don't really use that in any of the promotion. And that's always our best performance from a registration perspective.
Yeah, I think on that note is like, I would lead with what's the learning outcome? What's, again, back to the value to the attendee. What are they going to get out of coming? That's the message I would focus on, not so much the platform or the format, or that you're virtual or remote or digital. I think that's beside the point. It's kind of obvious that's where we're all at.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The stuff that we find performs best is always the stuff where the subject line clearly identifies a problem that the user is going to be able to solve with this information. Sometimes the format of that is an article, sometimes it's a video, sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it's an actual event, but it doesn't really matter. That's the stuff that's less relevant. The only time that's different and we get super high performance on something that's specifically related to an event is where it's the early bird tickets going on sale and everybody's looking for their discount.
Yeah, good point, James. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, we see a spike on those, but then again, I think our newsletter open rates are a little different to most. When we get typically 40% as an average open rate, which I think is a little better than most of the industry tends to see.
Yeah, I think anything that's free or discounted, I click it right away. That always works for me.
I was gonna say, James, yeah, that's a pretty good open rate. I just want to give you that kudos. So.
We do pretty well, but we're really harsh on minimizing the advertising and stuff like that. So
that's worth bragging about.
It's all content, no filler, no advertising, and people really appreciate that. I can see a bunch of questions coming in about people whether we're charging or not for this stuff. Because we're testing, because it's a whole new thing for us, we wanted to make it as engaging as possible and get as many people in there as we can, so that the data for it is meaningful and our sponsors have got a good reason to get involved and show some faith. So what we've done on this particular one is there's essentially two streams that are running each day. One is the actual keynote speaker for the day. We've made those sessions free. So the sponsors are getting a lot of visibility there. The delegates get to attend that for free. They get involved in the speaker Q&A for free as well. It grows our list. It allows us to run a successful event next year, hopefully, and keeps that interest there. What we're also doing each day then is a workshop on a specific topic. So much more detailed training material, taking people through real life exercises. For those ones, we are charging.
I think that's the right strategy, James. I think if it's, again, go back to what your goal is. If you're trying to just disseminate a message and you want broad reach and you have a product release tied to it and there's press tied to it, I would not charge for that information. However, if you're doing something technical and it's a hands-on training, definitely charge for that. And I think you have to look at your sponsorship strategy a little differently too, as to what's James saying, which part is free, or can they be an in-kind technology sponsor so that they're getting exposure and usage, but then event organizer, you're not hit with the P&L on the technology.
I think, so Dana, to that point, I mean, if you normally charge for trainings and you're delivering it digitally, and that's like a plan that you've always had, I totally agree with you. And you can still charge for that digitally. And actually there's a lot of solutions, ours included, where you can issue digital certification. And I think that helps people have something really tangible that they can walk away with, that also through the digital fatigue. And it actually is something that's much more easily administered in a digital context than in physical. So maybe your breakout sessions or your user conference comes a 5-day training set ends up leaving people walking away with a certification and digital badge. That can all be automated and it's pretty easy. And then that's it's not just coming to consume the content, it's proving that you now have the skills afterward, which I think is really valuable.
Yeah, for our distributed event, that was free of charge, and we were debating if we wanted to keep it free or have a charge for this year's event, but we've decided to keep it free as well. Instead, we're looking into other charitable cause that we can donate to. That's something that's kind of still in discussion, but thought that we can tie in some good with our event with distributed and just around like what we can support in terms of climate change or whatnot. So that's another consideration
Johanna,
instead of.
that's sorry, I
Mhm.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, it's
That's
okay.
really cool. I can't remember. I saw another game developer who, when GDC was canceled, they threw up their own event really quickly. But the one thing they did that I thought was really cool is they asked for $20 donation that went to the WHO, and then the planning company matched that.
I love that. Yeah, so donation is also a good way to go. Yeah, and we have a few minutes left here, so I just wanted to address this one question that came in from Anna. What are the most important aspects of in-person events that you're losing while transitioning to digital events?
Well, I think the reason I fell in love with events is that there was no other channel to bring your brand to life through all the senses, right? And when we're in a digital world now, we're restricted to two. We've got visual and we have sound. And the thing that I see over and over again recently, as people are panicking and rushing to get their digital events out there, is there's not a lot of consideration for how sound plays into your programming. So just like imagine you walk into a keynote and you're playing the music to pump everybody up. Why is there not pump up music as your people are in the reception area or the waiting area before the session starts? Why not play that walkout music for your speaker before they start? Like, yeah, there's opportunities to bring sound design into this, and I don't think a lot of people are thinking about that right now.
Oh, go ahead, James. Sorry, I was just gonna say, tactically, we just published a blog. I should find it, that like we've tested a lot of the different equipment for if you can only do a webcam. The microphones that we'd recommend. We have professional video production people on staff. So I'll share that just in case that helps for people who are looking like, how can I make my sound better quality now that I'm presenting from home? I'll share that right now.
Great.
Go ahead, James.
I was going to say, from our perspective, running the physical events over the last few years, we've developed a very, very strong sort of soundtrack playlist that people really, really associate with our events. They really, really love. It's kind of, there's a lot of tracks on there that people know, but they're always sort of bass heavy recuts with a lot of trumpets. It's got a very distinctive feel to it. And we get people time and time again tweeting us after the conference, can we get a Spotify playlist of the stuff that you use for the interstitials and that kind of thing? So one of the things that we're looking at is how we make sure that continues to appear through the online event as well. Let's keep that theme. Let's keep that ident.
I love that.
And I think it's, somebody asked about how you keep them engaged. It's a great idea, James, that's become an identifier for your program and your community. Why don't you co-create that and open up that Spotify playlist that everybody gets to contribute to it too?
Yeah, I love that.
I remember.
Oh, Joanne, I was just going back to that question. I think I was going to add on to what Dana said. I always feel like that so much of what happens digitally is in breadcrumbs. So you think you've got this full story and you've got it mapped out and it exists in a slide. But if you're being honest, your audience is often like catching snippets of it. So events are that time where you have this audience that is captive and you're able to tell that full, here's our view on the world, right? And then ultimately get down to, and here's how our solution enables for you to do that too. And here's why it's different. And there's very few times that you can have that cohesive end-to-end vision being presented to your audience. And that is, for me, selfishly, from the company that's hosting the event, that's why it's so valuable. I think you're not relying on your audience to put it together. You're not relying on their interpretation of your written content. And so I think that's something you need to keep in mind when you're translating physical to digital. How can you tell that full cohesive story? How can you integrate different CTAs for people who are at different stages of their journey? How do you allow for some people to see a demo of your product by linking to it while also just giving a thought leadership conversation? So just because it's digital doesn't mean it's not multi-touch, and just because it's digital doesn't mean it's not a fully integrated experience. You just have to figure out all those different triggers and CTAs to bring to that environment.
Yeah, I love that. And I was just going to add, just with my conversation with Dana a few weeks ago, a suggestion was like investing in your backdrop. So I love that you can see, you know, where everyone's calling from, but it's kind of like when you invest in a venue and you have like your stage and your lighting, like why don't we repurpose that for digital events? I saw one idea floating around, like you can mail a mic to your speakers or anything that might help them kind of
Did we
elevate
lose her?
more of the experiences.
I think we might have just lost it, Anna. Yeah.
I can pick up what,
Yeah, my internet might be.
you know, you think about, you brand the podium, but you don't obviously have a podium now. So a nice speaker gift is to get them like branded Beats by Dre headphones. And now you've got that persistent brand as they're talking, but then they're probably going to keep it and use it for other events too. And it's just a nice gift.
And then maybe you could brand the headphones with your company's branding, and that's something that you know, that'll be carried on. So that's a cool idea. Alrighty, well, we are a little over time right now, but for any other questions that pop on mind, let me know in the chat. If not, you can email me and I'll add it to the board. In the next hour or so, I'll go ahead and share the recording with this board that Hollis has put together. There you can add comments and ask your questions that way. But I just want to say a huge thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Dana, Tess, and James for being here today. And yeah, James, good luck with your event next week and let us know how it goes.
Yeah, we're rooting for you.
Thanks
Take
so much.
care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck. Bye.
Bye.